I used to watch, well, I guess I still do watch a channel, YouTube channel, of a guy who lives in, don't quote me, I think Minnesota or Michigan. Starts with an M, and I know it's up north. Maybe Montana, regardless. He was a young guy, and his whole channel was about firewood. He was really smart. And what he was trying to do was dispel all the myths of firewood. And he wanted to talk about the science of firewood. Unfortunately, he got sick. I don't know for sure. I'm kind of guessing, but I think he got cancer. I haven't heard a word about it. And they posted one other video, and it was kind of a reminiscence of the family video. So I'm kind of guessing he didn't make it, and that's terrible. I still subscribe to his channel, and anytime one of his videos pop up on my feed, I go ahead and play it because I know they'll make money off of it, and that'll go into the bank account for the family. So, but he was a real smart kid. And I call him a kid because he had to be in his 20s. He had a propane tank, but the propane cost was so high that he cut firewood. He was really smart, and he's taught me a lot about firewood and these new modern wood stoves. I've talked about these new modern wood stoves. In 2014, the federal government came out and pretty much, well, I guess banned all firewood stoves. They wanted a particular particulate amount, you know, ppms, parts per millions of smoke that could come out of the chimney. I forget what it is, and it doesn't really matter, but none of the firewood industry companies, fire stove companies, met the requirements. So basically they had to take all their products off the shelves. That year, they immediately had to redesign how the wood stoves worked. Now, we've talked about this before. Now you can buy basically two different kinds. Well, maybe just one kind now. Last year you could buy two different kinds. One has a catalytic converter, and it looks like a radiator up there at the top, like a car radiator. And what it does is it takes that smoke and burns it. The smoke is wood, it's firewood, just being released into the air. And they call this firewood, this dust, whatever you want to call it, pollution. What they've decided, and then the second kind that you can buy is like the one I have, has these little air tubes at top, and they do the same thing as a radiator, probably not as efficiently. I think you can get some wood stoves that are 95% efficient, which means it burns 95% of the material that you put in it. It doesn't go up the chimney. Only 5% goes up the chimney. Now my stove is only 75% efficient because it's got the air tubes. Instead of a radiator, it's got 3 air tubes. And so 25% of the material out of this log goes up in the chimney. Now if I can get it hot enough, 500 degrees or better, I don't see any smoke coming out of the chimney. But when it cools down, then I start to see just a little bit of smoke. It almost looks like steam coming out of there. It's very light. Now, that's where you get the most efficiency from your stove, is all that smoke that you're burning. And that smoke is primarily what burns in your stove nowadays. You'll see one little orange flame flickering, and I guess they've designed these things so that this one little orange flame will flicker to keep those tubes or the radiator hot. As long as that radiator and those tubes stay hot, then the smoke comes up, hits those tubes or hits that radiator and bursts into blue flames. And it's really pretty. I always imagine that's what the aurora borealis, the northern lights, look like. It's just these dancing blue flames. It's really pretty. So that's where all the energy is coming from these stoves now, is the smoke. Last night I sat there and I watched it as closely as I could because I felt like the smoke was a little heavier coming out of the chimney than normal. I took a headlamp. I got this little headlamp. I was flashing it inside there, look to see if I could see any smoke. And sure enough, I saw a little bit of smoke coming off one log. So I pulled the vent out a little bit so I get a little bit more air. And sure enough, as soon as I did that, it got enough air, it started lighting off that smoke. It came back out the chimney. I couldn't hardly see any smoke come out of it at that point. So you got to keep it hot. I've said that many times that this wood stove is probably too big for our house. It's 2,000 square foot stove. Our house is 200 square feet, but I'll put 2 logs in it in a north-south direction and then another east-west direction. So I can cut this log in half and basically get 2 logs out of this one log. Now, I know a lot are going to say that's not a log, that's a stick. But that's all I need. I don't need a lot. I'm really satisfied with these new wood stoves. I mean, they really put out a lot of heat. And efficient, and it's clean, and it's pretty, it's neat to watch. And when you go to bed, it's just very relaxing. But in order to do that, I've talked about firewood quite a bit. It's got to be dry. Just the other day I made a video where I was talking about deadfall, and I showed you that you can stick your hand in the deadfall and it feels wet. Well, the very next day I made a community post and I said, can you burn deadfall? Now in the video I said, you can't burn deadfall, it's too wet. The majority of the people, 70% of the people said, yeah, you can burn deadfall in the new wood stoves. Well, how'd you miss that? I mean, the whole video was about, no, you can't. It's got to be dry, because what happens is the water will cool down the log. So you got to get the log hot enough that it'll burn the smoke. And if you don't get that orange flame, it's not going to get it hot enough. I forget what it is. I think it's water will cool down your log by 30%. So let's say a cord of firewood is 100,000 BTUs per cord of wood. It's not, it's about 30. But let's just say it's 100,000 BTUs per cord of wood. So you drop off 30% because it's wet. Now it's only 70,000 BTUs. That's significant. Now the bigger problem is it doesn't burn properly in the new wood stove. It just won't burn because the stove is designed to burn smoke. You're not getting smoke, you're getting water. And so that water hits that catalytic converter or those air tubes, cools them down, and it just won't burn the smoke. You got this bunch of creosote going up in the chimney, sticking to the chimney. Now the chimney is not hot enough. The chimney's supposed to get up 250 degrees. Yeah, I think it's supposed to be hotter than 250 degrees. If the chimney's not hotter than 250 degrees, gooey, tarry smoke sticks to the walls of the chimney and you'll get a chimney fire, because that's eventually, bark goes up there, it'll catch on fire. In order for it to catch on fire, it's got to be 450 degrees. That's what paper catches fire at. So it's not much. Just a little spark will catch it on fire. And I've had fires in this chimney last year when we had to burn wet firewood. During these videos where I've been trying to explain what you got to do, I get a lot of feedback. Well, what you got to do, Rob, is you got to burn wood with bark because it keeps the firewood from burning so fast. And I tried to argue, no, it doesn't. Oh man, when I came back in that video and I said, no, the bark doesn't do anything. People are telling me the surface area changes. It doesn't change. There's the same amount of surface area in these two sticks. If they're, the same weight and same length and all that, the same amount of surface area. One just happens to be round and the other one happens to be square. These two pieces of wood, assuming they're the same exact size, will produce the same amount of heat. It's BTUs. It's all measured in British thermal units. That's all we can calculate it by. There's nothing else involved. Doesn't matter if it has bark, no bark. I decided to do a test because this bark thing, people are really upset that I would say that wood with bark burns the same rate as wood without bark. And what I did was I took two logs, same size, two like this. I weighed them out the best I could. Now this is not a scientific study, but I weighed them out. I cut off the ends so they were both the same length, and I tested both of the pieces to make sure they were the same moisture level, and both of them were at 18% moisture level. Same amount of water, same length, same weight. So roughly the same size. One had bark, one did not, just like this. So I put them in there, and here's what I discovered. They both went to ashes at roughly the same amount of time. Not to the millisecond or anything like that, but roughly the same amount of time had passed. So it wasn't like an extreme difference between the bark and the not bark, because what they're telling me is, oh, I can sleep all night with wood with the bark on it. What I did notice, though, between the two, is the one without bark always had a flame on it. The one without bark never flamed up at once. It turned to hot ambers, is what it did. It glowed the whole time. My assumption is what happened was the one with bark went to smoke, and it was burning the smoke, just like the wood stove's supposed to do. This one, although it had some smoke coming off it, also had that yellow-orange flame. So you're still getting the same amount of heat out of both of them because they both had the same amount of BTUs. It was just too obvious. When I saw it burning at the same time, one had flames, the other, it was just completely obvious what had happened. Now, here's two things about barked wood that non-bark wood may change the dynamics of. One, bark on firewood, on wood, period, on trees, protects the trees from fire. And you'll see this down in Florida a lot. When they do these controlled burns, you'll see trees all over just scarred with burn marks that's been burned, but they're not dead. And so what's happening is the bark is protecting it from burning down and flaming up. That's my assumption now, because now I see that it's not flaming. So if it's not flaming, that means flames aren't spreading to the next tree. This is a good thing. The other thing that I think is critical to this is bark wood, if it's not split, retains water longer than non-barked wood. This will dry out faster than this because the bark is holding that moisture in. The other one has no bark, so nothing's holding it in, dries out faster. That being said, it still should dry out within 2 years pretty easy. Now this one being so small, it's only taken a year. Here's what I think's happening. If you're telling me that bark firewood lasts longer in your wood stove, it would seem to me that you have wood in there that's got too much moisture content. When I first got the wood stove, and I showed everybody the wood stove, it wasn't even in the house yet, it was on the back of the truck still. First thing somebody said to me is, you're not gonna like that, you can never get it to light, and when you leave and come back home, the fire has died on you. Well, immediately, all you gotta do is read the instructions. The first thing, and about the only thing the instructions talk about throughout the whole thing that is so super critical, is dry firewood. It's gotta be 20% or less. You can buy moisture testers online on Amazon for $20. And pretty much every log that I take in the house, we're splitting down into really small pieces, and I test each one. It's that simple. It's not hard. 2 probes go into the wood and it tells you the percentage. So I hope I can inspire you to thoroughly research your dream. Thanks for watching.